Hello, welcome everybody to what is the third interview now. Today we have got Cllr Ian Spiller, representative representative of Laleston and Bryntirion, incorporating Broadlands on Laleston Community Council. Thank you for joining me, Councillor. How are you
Thank you
today?
very much, Luke. Very much looking forward to it.
That's great. Well, this has been a long time coming now because we've had a few little setbacks trying to get this
A few
sorted.
hiccups along the way that were a bit unexpected, shall we say.
Yeah, and then we decided, I believe it was Wednesday, let's get this done out the way. We'll do it Saturday. So I
Indeed.
apologise to people if we didn't get to ask you questions. We will sit down with Councillor Spiller again at some point and get you to put in some questions to ask him. Okay? Right, so you've been a councillor for quite a while now. Can you give us a bit about your background and what brought you into politics?
Local politics, indeed.
Mm.
So I started as an elected councillor in 2012. At that time, well, actually, we'll wind back a little bit. I'll start with me what got me into politics. Um, I grew up in mid Cornwall, in a place called Northstall. And throughout my early school years or my secondary school years, I became quite interested in local politics. Did my work experience with the MP, who's a chap called Matthew Taylor, who was the local Liberal Democrat MP down there, and became a member of the youth party of the Lib Dems. Moved to Bridgend in 2007. Started my family here. So my children, my second child was born in Bridgend, and obviously have gone through the schools here. In 2011, I was out of politics for quite some time. I got absolutely infuriated by the then council's decision to award a very stupid contract, in my view, to Cllr, who were dealing with recycling at the time, and use those lovely little black buckets that we had to put all of the plastic and all of the paper in. And every time we got a bit of wind, the whole of my community was covered in rubbish. And it may sound like something really inconsequential to get you moving and get you motivated to start trying to do something. But I wrote to the local councillor for Broadlands at the time, who was a chap called Wayne Morgan, who was a Liberal Democrat, and didn't like his response very much. But at the time, I've been out of politics for a while. David Cameron was the leader of the Conservatives at the time, and I kind of got taken away by Liberal conservatism, which is definitely a thing of the past these days.
Yeah.
And joined the Conservatives. And I stood against Wayne Morgan in that election, and did exactly what was said I would do, and cost Wayne Morgan his seat and let a Labour councillor take it. And unfortunately, very much in my seat, you vote Conservative, you let Labour win.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
And Siri decided to get involved in that as well. So that's a bit of kind of where I came from. 2012 really was my first year. It was a baptism of fire, I can tell you, being the only Conservative councillor at the time sitting on Laleston Community Council, which was essentially a Liberal Democrat and Labour council. There was those two parties and me. Yeah, that was fun. 2012, really there was lots and lots of change in Bridgend. I don't know whether you remember. I'm going to share my screen with you just so you can see it, but this is what happened in 2012 in Bridgend. We had the Labour Party, or the Welsh Labour government, actually talk about downgrading hospital services across Wales. We were part of the South Wales plan, I don't know whether you remember that, Luke.
Yes, I remember it. They were looking to merge hospitals, weren't they? And A&E.
They certainly were. And what they suggested was either Prince Charles Hospital in Merthyr, the Royal Glamorgan in Llantrisant, or Bridgend, Princess of Wales, would lose some of its services. So in October 2012, I began a big campaign on Facebook. And this was really close to my heart because my eldest daughter was born with 3 small holes in her heart. And the thought of, thankfully, not life-threatening, but the thought of it being life-threatening, having a child born in Bridgend and not having those services there. And if you think about the valleys, you think about all of the transportation links coming down to Bridgend, they're bad enough anyway. To try and get that to Merthyr or to the Royal Glam was just ridiculous. So I started this campaign, and that very much began on Facebook. And it was, just to keep Bridgend's services and everything completely intact, keeping the A&E, keeping the children's ward, keeping the special babies unit, and the consultant-led births. So paediatrics, obstetrics, and the other one that I've completely forgotten, and you have to forgive me.
It was A&E,
neonatal. There we are. It's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is what happened basically. So in 2012, 2013. I held a cross-party meeting with Clyde, with the Conservatives, with the Liberal Democrats, against this absolute abomination of a plan, and got quite a bit of press coverage. And in 2013, we were successful. Bridgend Hospital was deemed to be the regional centre. I've got to say, it was still an absolutely horrendous plan. But they kept their regional centre status. The A&E wasn't under threat, and we kept all of our services. So that was really me, Luke, and what got me into politics. And now I'm just trying to work out how to unshare my screen because I use Zoom so often, which is always good.
I haven't got a clue. Right, we might have to stick with that for the rest of the.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Right. Is yours still there? Oh, no, that's not there. There we go.
Do you know, there's a trick there, Luke. The joy of using Teams is that I've got a little X. When I use Zoom, I should have seen the big red flashing light at the top that said stop sharing. But there we go. The joys of working from home, eh?
Yes. It's quite funny because when I spoke to Alex and Martin and now yourself, everybody seems to have that little one thing that starts that niggle of saying, well, something's not right here. With you, it was the waste contract, and with Martin and Alex, it was other things. Now, what got me started really interested in standing locally was, I don't know if you remember, I think it was back in late 2015, 2016, opposite Ravenscourt, they changed the pedestrian lighting system. They went from straight across to diagonal, or the other way around, one of the two.
Yeah.
And when they did that, they laid it all down, took a few weeks, they relayed the road and then painted the lines. Less than 2 weeks later, they dug up that part of the road again and relayed it and painted the lines. It was the fact that you could see how much waste was going on around the county, and there was always this thing of, we don't have enough money, we need to save 30 million in the next 5 years, or this amount in the next so many years. I just thought, well, if you did plan things properly and looked at contracts properly, then you wouldn't have all this waste, and that money could go to saving for what you need, which it really is bugbear of mine that you can see the amount of waste going on, how many times they relay roads when they've only dug it up 6 months before and relay.
I think the problem is with the way services and everything are all segregated. Joined up thinking just doesn't seem to even come into it, does it?
No, and the other thing I see that coming towards the next financial year, if they've got a pot of money left over, they've got to use it or not get the equivalent amount on the next one. Why should they have to use that? That's what I'm saying.
Well. I mean,
Unless they can show they've got a plan for that money, just put it into something you've got a long-term plan for.
Do you know, Luke? I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, as you know, we were talking just before we'd started recording about the A48 campaign and the tragedy that was obviously resulted from the death of Bruce Rubery. Bridgend Council, the Highways Department, they applied for funding from the Welsh Government to do some work on the A48 and obviously down to the A473. And I find it absolutely remarkable that we can tarmac over roundabouts to create cycle routes when cyclists would clearly just go round the roundabout. I mean, I can't imagine anyone having a picnic in the middle of the roundabout, can you?
No.
Rather than actually spending that money on improving road safety at pinch points where it's most definitely needed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the amount of times I see somebody trying to turn right out of Merthyr Road and cross the A48, and the signage is rubbish. They paid for new signage. They thought that putting 2 extra signs up and taking the road speed down to 50 was actually going to do anything. You needed to put safe crossings. I mean, we've had the blessing this summer holidays of some great weather, and the amount of times I've seen kids run across that road from Newbridge Fields across to the other side to get to the Dipping Bridge.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And the answer from the council seemed to be to use the old cattle underpass. Well, common sense tells you kids are going to take the shortest route possible.
Yeah,
and the shortest route possible is straight across the road.
Yeah, and they don't think about things like that. They don't see the perceived dangers like adults do now. We've got
no
wisdom, and we see, right, that car's going a bit fast. Let's wait a second.
Indeed.
But there should be there. You've got a major housing estate right on the edge of that A48. There should be a crossing at least with pedestrian lights there.
Well, for as long as I've been a councillor, there's been talk of doing something with that road. I mean, Bridgend County seem to enjoy putting traffic lights on roundabouts. So I'm absolutely amazed we haven't had traffic lights on the Broadbent roundabout yet. But you're quite right. I mean, we've got 2,500 houses here. Common sense says people are going to get out, they're going to walk. We're right on the edge of the rural community. Really, the place that we're going to go and walk is we're going to go to Merthyr and we're going to go to the Dipping Bridge and we're going to go that way.
And to the sand dunes that are not far off either.
I mean, what a beautiful part of the world we live in.
I know. Beautiful.
And you want to go out and you want to explore that countryside, and you've got to take your life in your hands across the A48 to get there. I mean, we go back to joined up thinking that could have been paid for by the developers when they built this estate. Instead, they let the developers get away with as little as possible, and what we still have are 12 years on, unadopted, well, in fact more than 12 years on, unadopted parts of the estate where we've actually got Monmouthshire Council working on behalf of Persimmon cutting grass.
It seems to be a common theme recurring throughout this county. Being in Coity Higher, we see what happens with Persimmon on Park Derwin. That there's no urgency to hold them accountable to their agreements. This is Persimmon. For Bridgend Council, they do it at Tremorcastell with Wimpy and with Taylor Wimpy and things like that. They don't hold them accountable when there's clear things in there that say you have to do this by this date, and they just give them warnings. But yet they continue to keep authorising, agreeing to extra development or more development continuing on when they should have. It's like when I first stood in Litchard for Community Council in 2017, Park Derwin had been built for 6 years, most of it, and there was a sign on the estate in Park Derwin that said coming soon, new play park. And that's been there for 6 years. And I
Have you
think
got your play park yet?
there's some play parks been built, not all of them, and because of the summer weather and that, some of the grass has not taken properly because it has to be shut so long until so the grass can knit in, and because of the weather, the grass has dried out and burnt out, so they're going to have to replace it again. It's the same on Tremorcastell. Not all the parks have been built, and they've only just cleared the area for where a park's supposed to be, and that was supposed to be developed before COVID came into effect.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And they send warnings, and we get reports from the council, from Councillor Amanda Williams all the time, who is the Coity representative, that they're just sending warnings when they could clearly enforce what they're doing. And to go back to the unadopted areas, the unadopted roads and things like that, they're supposed Persimmon or whoever built Broadlands, I can't remember, it's so long ago now.
It was multiple builders, but Persimmon were probably by far the largest. I mean, they built the majority of the west side of Broadlands. To say it's been a frustrating process to get them to hand it over for adoption would be the understatement of the century.
Well, they're supposed to build it to a certain standard before the council considers any sort of adoption of the land. But the council save money by not pushing the adoption, and
they do,
and that's the problem. But
there's a fatal flaw in the whole system, because the council don't want to push for adoption because they'd have to cover the cost then of maintaining it. But there's no mechanism that exists to force the landowner to even hand it over for adoption.
No.
Now I'm very fortunate to be now part of the Liberal group on the community council, as you know, and we've been very, very forward thinking over the last 10 years about putting in new play parks, looking to upgrade facilities. We've done that without any handouts from DCDC, and you've seen all of the handouts that have been given in certain areas. We installed the first all-inclusive play park, I believe, in Bridgend up at Bryntirion Field, which is a remarkable project from Tony Barrow, who championed that right the way through. But we've looked at putting, even on my road, we've got a lovely little green patch that was overgrown for years. And I got in contact with Bovis, spoke to a lovely chap there. They now maintain the land, got them to agree to put it up to adoption for BCBC. You can take it. So we've not been able to build a play park where there should be a play park, because BCBC won't take the land for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So even when they put it up for adoption, you find people stalling. And that's incredibly, incredibly frustrating when you get a decent home builder that will actually work with you. You end up banging your head against a brick wall. And I think this is the frustration for me, is that I'd rather be in the inside of that, banging my head against a brick wall, trying to fight for the people in my community, than being someone on the outside, not knowing who to talk to, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, because, and that will come on to something we're going to talk about a bit later. It makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of people out there who do know what councils and that are supposed to do, but there are a lot of people who don't really have a clue what community council does and what a county council does. But we're going to come on to that a little bit later. So it's been nearly just over 4 years since the last election. You were obviously elected to Laleston Community Council. What has Laleston Community Council done for the local area in the last 5 years? Or 4 years?
That's a really, really good question. So I think not as much as I would have liked. In all honesty, I think COVID has really, really stifled what we would have done in an ordinary term. Also, the council is no longer Lib Dem led. As you know, when you have multiple groups, sometimes you have multiple interests.
Yeah.
But I'm really pleased to say that the council does work together. And it works for the benefit of the community. And I think the big thing that came up this time was Bridgend Council wanted to get rid of all of the community buildings, pretty much, and get them into different ownership. So what we did as a community council is we took over the Laleston and Bryntirion Community Centre in Bryntirion, and we've spent a large proportion of our precept upgrading those facilities, making them fit for purpose. So, we're blessed there that we've got playing fields, we've got decent parking facilities. Obviously, I talked about the inclusive park, but we've invested heavily there in making sure that we've got the only community building left within our community there. So it's essential that we protect that. But we've also made it so it's useful for various groups. I know they have yoga in there, Zumba, and obviously you've got place there for kids' parties and things like that as well. So that for us, despite COVID, has been the big project over the last few years. But we've also, I think we've learned from COVID that people are now working from home a lot more. I think that blended working is certainly going to be something that's going to continue. I speak from my own experience, where I work for a business that's closed lots and lots of offices because we've realised we actually don't need them. No. There's great efficiencies in people working from home, and actually they work more productively. So one of the things we have looked at doing is putting adult exercise equipment into some of the parks. So over the next few months, you'll notice those appearing in different bits of our community, which I think is a great thing to be looking at doing as well.
I think that's great, and I think it's hard to keep up with what a community council does, and people don't generally know unless they're connected on Facebook, continue looking at the website or things like that. I think but when a council does something wrong, no matter what council it is, that is everywhere and everybody knows about it. Bad news travels round faster than good news. It does,
and I think the frustrations I get are hedge cutting, dog poo, litter bins. That you would love to wave a magic wand and say, yeah, we'll do all of that, but actually that doesn't. We don't have the power for that. That's not Laleston Community Council. That's Bridgend Borough Council. That is what you pay your council tax to the council for. And what you can't have is double taxation, because a community council receives a precept to spend on certain things. So the nice things, we get to maintain church clocks. We get to
baskets.
I mean, you drive through Broadlands, Laleston, Bryntirion. They're beautiful floral displays. And that's something that we've done really to add to the street scene. Now people may say, well, have we not got better things to spend our money on? Well, if we can't make our neighbourhoods and our communities look a little bit nicer and feel that bit better and a bit brighter, then what are we here for? So we as community council have planted lots of daffodils in places over the years. They're little things that they may not mean a lot, but actually they really do brighten things up. You look at it. We've got the allotments in Laleston that we look after. We look at we put in bus stops. We do put in additional benches, for people to sit down and enjoy open spaces. You've then got grit bins that are paid for by us. So if you need a grit bin, you can write to Laleston Community Council, providing you live in the area, and we'll pop a grit bin in. But also you've got all the Christmas decorations. And one thing that I think we were really, really conscious of last year in particular, and it's certainly formed part of the plan for this year, is that when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're locked in and you didn't really know what Christmas was going to look like, actually those lights and those extra bits, they make you feel a bit better. They certainly make me feel a bit better. So it's about trying to improve people's quality of life. We've set up a community pantry. I don't think we quite get the amount of people in that we should to maintain it. But the thought process is there to try and give back to people in different ways within
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah, which is going back to what I said we'd touch on now. It's people don't really understand what community councils can and can't do. Um, what is their responsibilities? Now, you've had quite a discussion recently on the Broadlands Hub in this actual subject. This is why I wanted to bring it up, because people say, well, why don't the county councils stop putting up Christmas lights or putting out hanging baskets? Now, the majority of them are done by community councils across the Bridgend area. It's community councils who take that.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Bridgend County Parish Council paying for hanging baskets?
No, I can't. Their policy at the moment is to let things, the wildflower policy, which is seemed to have come out of nowhere recently. The reason why they're not cutting these grass
we don't
areas.
cut hedgerows or verges because we want to attract butterflies and such.
Yeah, this is a policy that seemed to come out of nowhere recently. We're not cutting it because we want the wildflower policy, which is all great. I'm all for wildflower.
It's a great idea, but it doesn't practically work where you're causing road traffic issues and things like that, does it?
Well, no, especially not on footpaths where people are trying to walk. They should be maintained regardless, and nothing should be the thing.
You look at it. I mean, you get the same excuse every year, and that excuse is the birds nesting. We can't cut the hedges. And you think about it. We're talking about joined up thinking earlier on. The birds nest every year at the same time. So why not cut the hedges beforehand so they get a chance to grow, the birds nest, and then cut them afterwards? And I mean, it may sound like a radical idea, but surely that has more merit than expecting, a young mother or an elderly person or someone on a mobility scooter or someone out running to take their life into their hands, having to leave the pavement, go onto the road to avoid the branches that have taken over the whole path. Yeah. And you then think about the cost of council tax to our residents here, and there's a big proportion of stupid amounts of council tax being paid on Broadlands and Laleston and Bryntirion, and you look at it and you go, how on earth can we not get a plan in place that involves hedge cutting twice a year?
Bridgend Council, I believe it's the 6th highest, or it's certainly within the top 10 highest council taxes within not just Wales, but the whole of the UK. And Bridgend is supposedly a deprived area. So why are they having to pay so much council tax? Higher than a lot of London council boroughs.
I mean, I've seen the figures that you guys from Oxford County Independence have put up, and it's frightening figures. And I think to a degree, people accept that if you look at the wider world, we haven't got enough HGV drivers to get food on the shelves. We've got massive amounts of people with businesses that just can't get people to come and work for them at the moment. So that everywhere's stretched. I think we get that, and the prices of everything is going up. So I think ordinarily people would accept that prices do go up if they were actually getting the basic services that they should be getting. And we talk about cutting things. Let's bear in mind that council tax went up last year when it didn't really need to.
No, it's
and we're not getting any more services for it. So if you're putting all of this up, you've got to look at it and go, what are the key things that everyone moans about at every election? Every election, everyone moans about dog food, litter bins, and hedges and grass cutting and all of those things. How on earth have we not got into this bit of that's what's important to people? Fundamentally, that affects their everyday lives. Obviously, lots of other things. How on earth have we still not got this right?
I don't think people in Bridgend would mind paying as much as they do if they could see what was being spent on things that are of concern to them, like the litter, like dog mess and anything like that. But all they can see is services disappearing. The youth service practically disappeared 10 years ago, or less than that, when they wanted to merge with the Vale, and that all fell through because they were going to merge youth services with the Vale.
I remember.
They did merge the youth service, so everything went over to Vale, and there was very little in Bridgend. When Bridgend at one point had a very good youth service, but it was whittled down, and there's a small youth service now. But what are kids supposed to do? It's okay catering to adults. Yes, they're the voters and things like that, but they've got to remember kids will one day be voters, and they want to see what's going to be there for them, because there's not much around at the moment. Yes, there are some things, and there's a lot of charities that are putting on things for younger people, but it shouldn't be just left to charities to do that.
Well, you look at it. There is there's very little for children growing up to do. I mean, apart from walking down to New Bridgefield, hanging out with their friends, there's not really any activity. Certainly not. Where I was fortunate enough to grow up around decent community centres, community groups, drop-in centres. Things that existed within local communities that you could go and do. We haven't got any of that. And it's a crying shame. And then we get people talking about people hanging around outside Tesco's. What else have they got to do?
Yeah.
And there needs to be that kind of thought process. 100% agree with you.
Yeah, I used to go to the youth club at the old Nostalgia Comprehensive. That was 5 nights a week. That was there, and that was brilliant. Okay, you had to pay a little bit to get in. It was like 20p or 50p to get in. That's fine. It keeps kids entertained. It keeps them occupied instead of just wandering around the street. You'll always get kids wandering around the streets in groups because not everybody will want to do this. But if you've got nothing for them to do, there's going to be that, or they're going to be inside on the computers playing computer games, and they want kids to be more involved with exercise and things like that.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why the community council took the steps that it did to put in Nugas.
Yeah.
So we've invested heavily over the last, even before my time. I think Laleston was put in, but we've invested quite heavily in those multi-use games areas where people from the community can go in, and they've got basketball courts, and they've got places that they can actually play and do things safely. And that's really, really important. It's a crying shame, unfortunately, we haven't got anything like that on Broadland. We've got the teenage park. But unfortunately, that's something that we do need to heavily look at, because outside of school hours, there's nothing there.
No. Because I remember there used to be a youth club up at the Bryntirion High School, because I worked there a couple of times when I did work for the youth service many years ago. I covered there a couple of times. I don't know if it's still there. I really don't, because I know most of the majority of youth services in Bridgend was cancelled. But you take away things for kids to do, they're going to get into trouble because they're bored.
Unfortunately,
and it's not their fault.
But we've all been there, mate.
Oh yeah, we've all done it as teenagers. But in our day, we used to get a clip from our mothers. Can't do that now. So we've looked at what community councils can and can't do in a little area. We can't do everything that people want, because a lot of it is county council's responsibility.
Indeed.
And if the community council taking over those responsibilities, which you do when you do a capital asset transfer, like a community centre and things like that, it's to keep facilities going.
I think moving forward, we have to find a way that if Bridgend County Borough Council aren't going to maintain the areas properly, we have to find a way of doing it. It's as simple as that. My view is that's what we pay our council tax for, and we should be demanding those services of Bridgend Borough Council. We certainly should not be whittling down the small amount of precept that community or town councils get, that they have they should be spending it on the niceties rather than essential services. So we should be absolutely insisting that the councils work in a better way. Now, if that does require a more joined up approach where people work together, then that's what it has to be. But we need to start demanding that does take place. And I mean, I think that's going to form very much a lot of people's thought processes, certainly in May next year.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem is with the council at the moment is very much tribalistic, parties against parties. Instead of trying to find ways to work together, whether you're independent, Labour, Lib Dem, Conservative, whatever, put your animosity aside and work for the betterment of the community.
Well, I think
that's what it should
as
be.
you well know, Luke, on BCBC, the Liberals have always been very much working hand in hand with, obviously, with part of the independent groupings. But obviously, previously we led the Rainbow Coalition, going back some time. When you talk about tribalistic parties, let's be very clear that they generally are one of two colours. And like to argue with, well, one of three, I suppose, maybe sometimes.
Well, I think even in the independent group that's on the council now, we can't. Well, I'm not a councillor on there, so I can't say we. They can be slightly tribalistic of banding together, and that's the problem. Everybody's working against each other rather than. I think at community council level, you find people from different parties and different groups working together better than you
Certainly.
do on.
And I 100% agree with that, because what I see on Laleston Community Council is very much people working together for the better of the community.
Yeah.
When you watch and you hear some of the stuff that comes out of Bridgend Borough Council, it tends to be opposition for the sake of opposition. It's ridiculous. It is all about working together to get a better county, to get a better town, to get better communities within those areas. So 100% agree with you. We have to work together moving forward for the direction forward.
Yeah, the thing I don't like, it's why I'm an independent, I don't like about party politics, nothing against you or anything like that, it's when you see them voting en masse for something that clearly is against what the town wants. Like the increase during the pandemic, during lockdown, of council tax. The people of the county clearly didn't want the increase, and every other councillor who wasn't of a particular party voted against or abstained, but the particular party voted en masse. And that can be seen as a message that we do what the party says. Yeah, and again, I think I'm very privileged that I've never been told how to vote, what to think, and quite frankly, I would not be sat where I am if that was the case. However, I've witnessed 100% what you're saying. Yeah.
And I agree with you. It should never ever be about the party. It should be about the community that we represent, what is best for our people. And I certainly would like to think that, speaking for myself, and I can only speak for myself, that the people in my community know me well enough to know that I'm never afraid to mince my words. And if it upsets people, it upsets people. But I will always have my community's interests at heart. People will disagree with me; they always will.
Oh yeah.
That's the nature of having an opinion. Someone will have an opposite opinion. But it's not about towing a party line. It should never be about towing a party line. And if we go back to just the Princess of Wales campaign we talked about a little bit earlier, what was notable from that is, you were talking about a majority Labour borough council who towed the line against. They would not come out and support Bridgend keeping their services. They towed the line that they would go with the South Wales plan, and that was ridiculous. Our community should have, we should have been up in arms. If it had been a Conservative government that had been talking about, can you imagine? But it wasn't. It was a Welsh Labour government that was talking about cutting services in Bridgend, and the Labour Party did nothing about it. And that, for me, is what you're talking about. Block voting en masse, party voting, and it's not.
Yeah, and we've seen times when there are consequences. Going back to the Vale of Glamorgan merger with Bridgend Town Council that they were trying to do. Now, when that vote came up, 6 Labour members voted against it or abstained. Whether this was a thing after, but all 6 of those members were
Deselected.
eventually deselected.
Yeah.
Good on those members standing up for what their communities want. The vote passed in the end, and the Welsh government, the Welsh Assembly ruled that they couldn't do it anyway. So it was all a pointless exercise, a lot of money wasted
As usual.
on that. But
And we wonder why people don't believe in these types of
but the telling thing is that these Labour councils that stood up and voted what their constituents wanted against party lines, what the party was telling them, I think the majority of them came back as independents. And we see that, and they're still doing good work today, and they're still independents. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Conservative or Labour or any other party, they can't do good work, because I've seen good work, and I've seen good work from councillors, both Labour, Conservative and things like that. They do good work and stand up for their communities. We've seen that in Bracklow with Save the Field, with Mayor Spanswick, who stood up and was counted for something that was important to his community. And I like it when I see something like that. We saw it with 2 of the Psalm Labour representatives when Tom D the housing development came up in. I think they either abstained or voted against it. It's good to see when their community matters more to them, and I think we need to see more of that from these parties. If parties started doing that, people could be more understanding of things, that they're looking to do the best for the communities.
I think what's most important isn't the party in these type of elections. The important thing is the energy of the person and the willingness of the person to stand up and do what's right for their community. And it doesn't matter whether they're red, yellow, blue, green, whatever. It's about, is that person going to stand up and look after and do what's best for me and my community? And if the answer to that is yes, then that's the person that should be elected. It's as simple as that.
That's the best person. Who is going to be the best person is the one who's going to stand up for your community. And regardless of what party or independent or whatever they are, they would be the best person because they're going to stand for the community to make your community better. And I think that's brilliant, and I respect any councillor from any party who actually does that, who voices their opinion, even if it goes against their party, because the constituents should always be the number one priority. Should come above party and your own perceived notions of things as well. Your constituents should override what you think, and I think that's part of why Madeline Moon lost her seat, because this is going to lead on to something else that's really got under your skin recently.
Oh, really got under my skin, yeah.
Part of the reason why Madeline Moon lost her seat was because Bridgend voted to leave, whether you agree with that or not. And we know she didn't, we know majority Labour Party didn't, but they couldn't decide what they were going to do. And she was voting against everything that had to do with leaving the EU. Whereas Bridgend, as a county, voted to leave the EU. So, regardless of what you think, your constituents are the one who are telling you what to do.
You know, I think lots of people have lots of different opinions, and my personal opinion doesn't make any difference at all. You are quite right that Bridgend as a whole voted to leave, and to a degree, you can't turn around to your residents and say you were all wrong. I'm going to do this regardless because I know better, and I get that completely. And I think that party politicians, including my own, have to take stock and actually listen to what people say. And it's one of the reasons why I've been quite silent on Brexit. Is because I actually can't make up my mind whether it's a good thing or a bad thing most of the time. I sit in two fences. And B, because it doesn't really matter what I think.
No.
You know, people voted en masse for something that they believed in, and it's down to us to make it work. That's what politicians are there for.
Yeah.
You know, at any level, we have to do what the people want, and we have to make it work.
Yes, whether we agree or not.
Indeed.
Yeah. So this is gonna. Now we've discussed that, we're gonna move on to what it's slightly hinted at, and something that's really got under your skin. And you've done a lot of posts, and actually been the first post, other than myself, on the Political Owl.
When I get incensed over something, I feel the need to comment on it, and
Yeah.
you're quite right. I mean, the news. I've sat down. I had a conversation with Cheryl Green, and I've been in meetings all day on Teams, and you know, staring at a computer all day. You tend to want to turn everything else off for a little bit afterwards, and and you know, where you have a conversation and you suddenly feel like it's just completely surreal to actually have that conversation about Broadlands, Laleston, and Merthyr Mawr, Bryntirion, our little piece of what is. I mean, Broadlands and Bryntirion are big estates in Bridgend, and we're going to be moving to Aberafon
With Porthcawl.
with Porthcawl. I mean, Porthcawl, you know, with the greatest respect, would probably want to go into the Vale or Aberafon at some points anyway, and I say that tongue in cheek. But to actually take a suburb of Bridgend out of Bridgend town and put it in another constituency, that's a madness. And people you know, will say, well, what does Jamie Wallace do for me? What does Madeline Moon do for me? It's not until you actually need an MP, or you need the advice of an MP, and I'll use this in the notion that some things are devolved, lots of things are devolved in Wales, but certain things still are still managed by the UK government. Now, if you want somebody to promote your town, your interests, you want somebody that's going to be focused on the whole area.
Yeah.
So for me, having Stephen Kinnock or whoever, how on earth are they going to give anything to a little tiny bit of Bridgend that really should be part of Bridgend when they've got to focus on big towns such as Porthcawl and Aberafon and all of that? It just doesn't make any sense.
I think the parts.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes right the way to Britain Ferry.
Yeah.
And you know, I was looking at it, and I'm going to give a bit of background to this because you know, a lot of people don't understand why this has been done. So, the Boundary Commission for Wales review, that basically this was done in England last year, and what it basically said was that every person in the UK should have similar or proportional representation, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
So the Parliamentary Constituencies Act 1986 was amended, and each nation and region of the UK was given a share of 650 MPs based on the number of registered electorates. And the Act says that each constituency must contain between either 69,724 and 77,062 votes, so 5% either way of the UK average, which would be in the middle. So what they've effectively done is, this is the proposal, and it's basically to merge Aberafon, Bridgend and Ogdall constituencies into two. So effectively we get better value for money because of devolution, if you want to call it that, less representation, I call it. But either way, there's a need to obviously, and actually I support the need for people to have equal representation. So those new constituencies will be Aberafon Porthcawl, which will give 76,792. So look at that. That's right at the top end of that average. And Bridgend would have 74,144. And this is the map effectively of what this looks like. Now the old Aberafon constituency is this. So it basically comes down from Skewen, Llandarcy, Britain Ferry, Talbot, Margam, and then comes around literally up through the valleys here, covers Blaenguilty and Glencorrog,
Can I just
Or-
say, before you go, the area you circled is actually where I live.
yeah, well, and this is the mad part about it, right? Is this bit here? That's Cllr,
Yeah,
right? Just underneath there, and you think of these communities; these are all interwoven. You know, they're not separate. They're not, but they are separate communities.
yeah,
Right? I watch my words. But they're very much interlinked. Now you look at then the numbers, right? So going back, you've got Bryntirion, Laleston, and Merthyr, which is 9,334 electorates. Now it looks like it's massive, but the
yeah,
reality is all of the people live here.
yeah,
Right, so you've got Broadlands there, you've got Bryntirion there. I mean, the school's pretty much here. I mean, it just absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. Now, if you were to swap this community, which is intrinsically linked, bear in mind that Aberavon is going right round here, the constituency boundary. If you were to take this and swap it with this, what you'd actually have would be a better balance, right? Because Aberavon Porthcawl would go would go to 74,537, and Bridgend would go to 76,643.
yeah,
Now you've got to wonder whether the person that looked at this actually looked at the map, because I mean it just seems absolutely coincident, and I believe in coincidence.
yeah. I saw this last night on a post about Kevin Cribble.
I think it'd be fair to say that the communities of Kyle, Kenbig Hill, and Kevin Cribble are pretty much linked together.
Oh yeah, very much so.
And I'd hate to insinuate that the Boundary Commission took this into consideration because obviously they're independent. But it just seems really odd to me that the leader of Bridgend Council's constituency is just kind of chiselled out here. Now, I'm not actually suggesting that should go that way. But what I am suggesting is that a bit of common sense needs to take place about where these communities are, where the houses are, how they're going to be best served. And I personally don't feel that my constituency, and ultimately I'm not elected to represent anybody else's constituency, I'm elected to represent my own. I don't feel that my constituency is best represented in that boundary. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And that's why I'm so incensed with it. And logic dictates that if you're going to send an MP to Parliament, and there we can talk about whether we should be or whether we've got the right person. It's irrelevant. If we're going to elect an MP to Parliament, we want it to represent that area.
Yeah.
Not that area minus a little bit that's now being worked from Aberavon. It makes no sense. So
really
hopefully you can understand the logic behind my thinking.
Oh, I could completely understand the logic, because at the moment the two MPs, Chris Elmore and Jamie Wallace, actually represent the whole of Bridgend County and nowhere else. They don't spill over into other areas,
No.
which is great, because then the county is getting a thing as one, rather than you've got an MP who's representing Aberavon, or if they're representing the Vale. Both areas have got different needs and different questions and different. I think it's better.
I think what we have to be very clear on is, in an ideal world, you'd probably keep the status quo.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely no way we can keep the status quo because of an act that's been passed in Parliament. So what you have to do is now make the best of the bad situation. Now, if you think about it, you've got areas there that are more closely knitted together. I mean, I find it absolutely miraculous how Bridgend would effectively become landlocked. They've taken. We lost. Obviously when Ogmore by Sea, Southern Down, and everything disappeared off into the Vale, we lost that to the coastline. There's now the proposal to take Merthyr Sand Dunes, which, when you think of Merthyr, you think of Bridgend. I got married in Merthyr Church a couple of weeks ago. It's Bridgend. We went up to Court Coleman. It's not, and people think, oh well, that means I'm going to get lower council tax. No, it doesn't.
No, nothing.
Because Bridgend, but you're still paying all your council tax, all your services, everything is still Bridgend. The only thing that's not Bridgend is we're going to be represented by somebody that looks after the town.
Yeah,
Doesn't
and that brings in the question then: if there's a business looking to come just outside, say, Porthcawl, and they've got another place at, say, they've got two places, one just outside Aberavon, one side just outside Porthcawl, and they want to merge into one area. What's the MP going to do? Because he's torn between two places. The MP for Aberavon has historically been Aberavon based, which is Stephen Kinnock at this time. Where will they, like, oh, it comes great for two areas, but it doesn't work that way, because Bridgend Council is one area and Eastport Town Council is another area, but he's split between which one, where does he really push the loyalties and that and thing. It comes, that's why I like what's there at the moment. We've got two MPs that serve Bridgend, so if there's something coming, they want Bridgend regardless. They fight for one area and it's a thing. But this boundary commission is going to reduce the number of MPs for Wales as well. I don't know if another area, whether England or Scotland or Northern Ireland, will get an increase of MPs or anything, but I think it was back in 2013 when this first started, they wanted to reduce the number of MPs from 650 down to 600 originally, didn't they?
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's still the goal, but it's funny how they bring down the number of elected representatives, but increasing the number of unelected in the House of Lords every year.
Well, that's a different argument altogether.
I know.
I mean, my party, as you very much know, are all about electing the House of Lords, because we have that two-tier system, which should give governance over should give some form of governance over the House of Commons. In reality, you've got jobs for the boys and girls.
Yeah.
You've got appointed rather than elected representatives.
Yeah.
Now that I can, I've read the arguments to it for and against for many, many years. But my stance on that is very, very clear.
I like the thought of the House of Lords because it's an overseer of what the House of Commons does, and it keeps them in line with the checks and balances. I think that's always important, but the increase year on year, not just from one party, Conservatives or that, or Labour or Lib Dems, everyone does it. There's several introduced every year, and more is introduced than actually leave or unfortunately pass away. So it's just growing and growing and growing, and the costs with that are growing and growing. I think it should be a limited number and split evenly between the parties in a way. Yes, you won't, it would be difficult for consensus, but their job should be overseeing what the House of Commons does to make sure they keep the parliamentary procedure, to make sure there's no scandals like the expenses scandals and things like that. I think they should be an overseeing body rather than let's reward this person for all their hard work that they've done. I admit people should be rewarded for the hard work they've done, but then there are a lot of people in the House of Lords who really haven't done much, but then get pushed into there because they've got the same way as
they do. I think the important thing to consider in that is how the House of Lords are paid. So, House of Commons, the Senate, anyone that's elected is paid a salary and expenses and everything like that. Anyone in the House of Lords, they can be given a lordship, but they're only paid for when they're there. So they're effectively paid a day rate for turning up and doing that. So if someone doesn't do anything, someone doesn't turn up.
No,
they don't cost us.
They don't get paid, but.
No, but I do take your point entirely. We talked about. I can remember the talk. About the European fat cats and the unelected bodies and things like that. effectively we do have our very own version of that. It's called the
gotcha.
House of Lords. So that's something that definitely should be looked at. But in my mind, Luke, it's not what drives me.
No.
And it's something that because I like politics, I have an opinion.
Yeah.
It's not something that it's not where I fancy ending my career. It's local politics for me certainly is probably the cusp of my political ambition, because it's all about affecting local communities.
Yes. I think affecting. Well, I certainly think I've never had an ambition to go to the Senate or to go to Parliament or anything like that. I've always had an interest in politics, but I've had a more interest in local politics because it's closer to where I live and it affects how I live and how the people around me live more.
Mm.
Okay, you've got national politics that does affect how you live, but I think more of an impact is done at county level, at community council level. It has a more day-to-day impact on how people live in their communities. Like with the hang baskets, how you perceive your community, or anything like that, whether you've got Christmas decorations. It's the community feel, which has been over the last 40, 50 years slowly
Very much eroded.
Evaporating to what it used to be. My dad told me this story from when he was a child. He was born in the war in 1940 in Cardiff, lived through the bombings there, but when he was a boy he used to go out scrumping for apples, and he got caught one day by the farmer. So he ran off. A police officer caught him. Police officer gave him a clip, took him to his mother, and his mother was there. She gave him a clip, and the farmer came round and he gave him a clip. He said that's what it was. If somebody caught you doing something stupid in your community, they gave you a clip, took you to your mother, and you knew you were going to get another one. So the community looked out for each other. And they always rallied around. We've seen it recently, unfortunately, with horrific news, tragic deaths of 2 young boys in the county of Bridgend. And it's sad that it takes tragedies like this to bring communities together as a whole, where you see people helping out everybody else. The pandemic, we've seen communities come together and try and help each other, and it's sad that
people will always come together in tough times.
Yes.
That's the thing. And I'm very, very proud of my community, in particular.
As you should be.
Absolutely tragic news regarding Luke Still. His family are very much in our thoughts.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we postponed, obviously, our original.
Yes.
But I think the lesson I learned from that is how touched and how much people wanted to show their support and didn't know how. I think for me, as a local councillor, it's very tough sometimes to understand what you should do. And I've said this to you offline. I was talking to one of your colleagues as well. But when something like this happens, you don't want to encroach on the family. You don't want to be overbearing. You want to think about how things are perceived. But at the same point in time, in tough times, communities need, I wouldn't say leadership, but they need somebody to kind of help guide them into something sensible. And I think we did the right things, and I think the community showed the family how much they were in our thoughts. When Breed Still's family put together a Just Giving post for Noah's Ark a few weeks afterwards, the amount raised for that charity was absolutely phenomenal. And it just goes to show the strength and depth of the Broadlands community and the wider community at large in Bridgend. You are right. Communities have very much eroded over a period of time, and they've changed their look and feel. But in tough times, we do come together.
Yeah, it's just I wish we could come together more as a community when the times aren't like I think Broadlands Fun Day does that, brings the community together, and you're very instrumental.
Does, and we are
into
back
that.
in 2022.
That's good.
I mean, yeah, I mean that was something that started. Again, it was much my upbringing. So you talk about, your dad's upbringing. My upbringing was very much in school fates, community fun days, and I came to Broadlands in 2007. There's no community centre. The heart of our community is Tesco's and the ever-changing shops, and the school. And you sat there and go, well, there's nothing that the wider community has other than the school to pull them together. And the concept of Broadlands Fun Day came up, and it was something that's very much a passion of mine. I often get told that I need to get things out of my head and actually on paper and communicate them. But it gets to a certain point of year where my children get very, very excited about what rides am I going to hire in next. And we've been looking for 2022 at the travelators, stunt jumps. We had a mobile cave there a couple of years ago, and we get great support. I very nearly went through that, but we had little Quasar laser domes, and then we've got the Scorpions kickboxing normally come in. They do a bit of a display because we've got lots and lots of kids as part of that group, and it just brings people together. And it's just about an affordable day. It doesn't cost the earth. The local businesses all chip in to cover the costs of paying for it with a bit of advertising. The community council chip in to cover it. And it's something that just gives back. It gives people a chance to get together and enjoy themselves. And you're 100% right. We don't do that enough. So anything we can do to do that, that makes a big difference. Yeah. And of course, we've got the fireworks display that we put on every year up at Bryntirion, which is a great free display as well. So we try our best to do those little things that do make a difference, hopefully, to people's lives.
So with all the negative news we've given with the Boundary Commission and that, some good news, Brack Fun Day is back next year.
Fun Day is back next year. Yeah, Broadlands Fun Day, bringing the fun back to Broadlands.
That's great. So, on to the final question now, and we've got the election coming up next year, and
Indeed.
You seem to know your ambitions, that you don't want to become a Lord in the House of Lords. What are your future endeavours? Are you standing next year as a community councillor and maybe a county?
I will be standing for both borough and for Laleston Community Council. As I said, I think change is well overdue.
Yeah.
And I want to be part of that change.
Good.
I firmly believe it needs people with fresh ideas, and it needs people that are willing to work together across party lines and none to accomplish great things. And ultimately, our town deserves better than what it's currently getting.
Yes.
Our communities deserve better than what it's currently getting. And if I can be part of that in 2022, then I should be very happy to serve.
Well, that's good, and I hope, I really do, because I think you are one of these very visual councillors that you see a lot of, whether it's you work with Saving the Princess of Wales, A&E, and other services, the A48 Brackler Fun Day. You do a lot for your community, not just Broadlands, but the community as a whole, because saving the hospital, it affected the whole of Bridgend County. Broadlands Fun Day, everybody from Bridgend County comes, someone from somewhere, every part of the county comes to that Broadlands Fun Day. I have, and when I was living over in Nostalgia, been there with my son and that, and he enjoyed it thoroughly. He's a lot older now, so see next year whether he still wants to go. But you do think, and I do hope and wish you good luck for next year's election.
Thank you, Luke.
Crucial question: would you ever stand for Senate?
Oh no. I enjoy working in the private sector way too much for that. Looking after my local community is what I'm here to do. It's not an ambition.
Well, good. And So thank you for doing this today on a Saturday morning.
Thank you for having me.
10 a.m. Things didn't go exactly how we wanted this morning. We were going to do it on Microsoft Teams, but for some reason neither of us could record this, which would be
and thank goodness, Luke, that I worked out how to unshare my screen on Zoom. Otherwise, we could have been staring at something absolutely ridiculous for quite some time. Last thing people want to see is a boundary commission sign up for any longer than necessary. But I will end, Luke, by saying, please make sure you comment on the proposals. We cannot have this change.
Yes, and if you send me, I've seen the link for the proposal. I'll put it underneath this video when I post it to Political Owl. Please comment on it, whether you agree with it or not. Comment on it, because at the end of the day, it affects everyone in Bridgend, no matter what area you live in. So, and it's good to get a rounded view of as many people as we can to see whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, to see what people want. We have our own opinions on this sort of thing.
We always will.
But we don't matter at the end of the day. We're just individuals. It's the group as a whole that have to decide, that should be deciding these things, not just Ian's opinion or my opinion or anybody else's individual opinion, but a group as a whole. So I'll post that link underneath, comment on it, and say what you've got to say. Whether we agree with you or not, we value your opinion regardless of what it is. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. So again, I will say thank you, and we'll look forward to speaking to you maybe closer to the election next year.
Closer to May, and we'll see what we'll see what wonderful things we have to talk about then.
Yes, and it probably won't be as friendly, because that'll be an interview that I'll have to give you a little bit of a grilling, because you're there to answer questions from people, I hope.
Indeed.
I hope. Anyway, thank you everyone for today and listening in. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Goodbye.